Jesus said, in all four of the Gospels, it was quoted that Jesus said he would have a house of prayer. And we know that one of the versions says a house of prayer for all nations. So kind of the word Kelly had that I think not only prayer, but even hospitality for the nations. And I think that's going to be part of the calling. It's going to be part of tearing down the walls. Guys, this house is going to be a real catalyst. But I also think it's going to be a place where you've combined a number of different things, like praise and worship. I think his presence is going to be something, when I just look at these guys, that's what they carry. But I also think, just with Desiree and us being here and others, the prophetic is going to be very strong here. And the prophetic, Paul was very clear that it's very easy to quench and you don't despise it. And I think if there's a weakness of religion, is it quenches the Holy Spirit and it despises the prophetic. And so I think what we're trying to create even tonight is an atmosphere that the prophetic is welcome, that the Holy Spirit is welcome. And there's another verse in the Bible, Acts 13, where it says they worshiped the Lord and ministered to the Lord with fasting and prayer. And it lists the 5 different men in that group. And historians say they were from, different races, different ethnic diversity. And the Holy Spirit sent them out, especially Paul and Barnabas. Well, my point of that is that it was an atmosphere of worship and prayer where the prophetic could speak. And yesterday I got a prophetic word. I was in Spring Hill, and this prophet prophesied over me. He's from South Africa. He's ministering to some churches, and I speak this over myself. I mean, I bring this about myself, but I look at Desiree. She definitely walks in this. But it was very interesting. His word over me was that he asked me, "What do I do?" And I said, "I'm a pastor of prayer." And he said, "Well, explain it." And I told him my desire is to see from the north, the southeast, and the west more prayer in this region. And churches praying. And then it was interesting, his commentary. He mentioned a prophet in the 1940s, 1950s by the name of William Branham. And he said, William Branham prophesied that by the end of this century, so 2000, that worship would become strong. I'm going to butcher what he said. But he basically said that that generation of that decade or that season would worship a God that they've never prayed to.
Whoa.
They worship a God that they've never prayed to. And that my calling, which is part of us together, especially if I'm going to give some oversight, I'm going to function out of my calling, especially what the prophets have recognized and what many laying on the hands of many people, but is that the prophet said yesterday, not only on mic but in person, is that, Bob, you're going to restore into this region prayer. So we know that worship is a form of prayer, but we know that many churches, even charismatic churches, Pentecostal churches, churches that were once of the Spirit, rarely pray any longer. We know the evangelical community even prays less corporately, except the National Day of Prayer. So here we are in the buckle of the Bible Belt where there's a great battle. And worship and prayer, it's not one's better than the other. And I think that's why Cliff and I are such great friends. He's such a great worshiper, but he loves to pray. My calling is to be a prayer general, and I love to worship. And I do think Desiree's the same way, and prophesy. So I think this is, I think we're like Colonel Sanders at starting a special recipe there that has always been the secret formula of worship and prayer and then building community. I think it's not by accident, you know what I mean, that you guys have built relationships there together. And I do think that spiritual growth is important. So worship and prayer is important. Um, Community, friendships, serving the poor, serving the less privileged, being a friend to the foreigner. Um, but I also think, and this is just something I place at your feet, but I do think spiritual growth is crucial. Discipleship, spiritual formation, they're all different words for it. And I do think that we should pray about being a center, even if it's one day a week, for the School of Supernatural.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, like the guys that I'm in submission to and covenant with, the guys in Brentwood and Franklin, own the franchise to the School of Supernatural. Not own it, but they paid $7,000 to Reading to be the franchise facilitator of it. And we know that there's, Debbie Bales has a School of Supernatural, John and Amy have it in Waverly, but they're pretty organic and wonderful. I mean, I spoke there last week, and some of us were up there. But from talking to my friends that have walked in the supernatural for like 2-3 decades, like Dr. Bill Bennett, he's using it in video form and live, using Bill Johnson and those guys. And Bill, who's flown in miracles for like 25 years, says it's taken his game to a whole new level. And so I know we'll talk about it, but as a team, I mean, I can get these videos, and then you can still have live teaching as well, so you could, I just think that we need to pray, and we need to have community, but I think there's something taking place in Middle Tennessee for spiritual hunger among people our age. Now, the young people are doing it too in their own little way. 20-year-olds, but people that have been around God for a long time are really starving for more. And so it's just a thought there. I'm just throwing out a couple ideas that you can be praying about, because I do think that when you look at churches in this area, they're being formed on 3 main principles. Worship and prayer, or worship, most of them, but I think this house should be worship and prayer. I think to also think about friendship, fellowship, community, breaking bread. People don't want to be alone any longer. You know what I'm saying? They want relationships, not hypocrisy, not the religion.